Hey there, it's Michael. I've got a whole list of Irish music that I could go on for a very long time about Irish music, but I got a whole list of Irish music in honor of St. Patrick's Day. But before I get into it, I thought maybe I would play a set of Irish jigs, and I'll tell you why I'm playing these jigs in a little bit. But I'll just go ahead and start into them. So here we go, a set of Irish jigs. There you go. So I picked those because one, they're fun jigs to play, but two, they have some history. And one of the things I love about Irish music is that it has this long history, this long connection into tradition, right? You know, they call it traditional music, and there is a tradition. And so I've got two tunes or two recordings that I've picked to commemorate today. One of them is on an album called An Historic Recording of Traditional Irish Music. And the guy who plays fiddle, one of the fiddles on that album, is a guy named PJ Hayes. And he recorded, decades and decades ago. And so we've got his recording on this and historic recording of Irish music. And then the other recording of this set of tunes, the first tune is called Cararo. And the second tune is called Portro. The second recording that I listed out is by P.J. Hayes' son, Martin. And Martin Hayes is an amazing fiddler, probably one of the best who's around today. And so he recorded that tune back in a live concert. I mean, I think he's recorded it a bunch of times. But he recorded in a live concert from Seattle in 1990. And I think it's just great to listen to the two different recordings. One, because it shows the tradition and the depth of the music coming from father to son. But two, it shows the way that the tradition is really alive. And even though, unlike jazz, where perhaps someone is going off and creating their own melodies, in this there is just the tune. By listening to these two different recordings, you can really hear how someone can bring their own take on a tune to it, how they can really interpret a tune to their own direction. And the second recording, the one by Martin Hayes, he's accompanied by a guy on guitar named Dennis Cahill. Dennis sadly passed away, I think, a couple of years ago. But he was really a master at kind of creating mood with accompanying guitar. And the accompaniment in Irish music, and you'll hear some accompaniment with piano in the first tune, there is usually no accompaniment written. The tunes are recorded or passed down orally by ear from person to person. I'll pick up tunes by hearing them played in a session or learning them off of recording, but they have no set harmonic component to them. And so the person who is doing a harmonic or rhythmic accompaniment is really making it up in order to support, once again, their idea of the tune. And so I thought that it was a really nice contrast to hear what a very old traditional piano accompaniment might sound like for these tunes, and then what a more modern guitar accompaniment might be, where Dennis is creating his own harmonic take on what these tunes might be. And then I actually have a third tune that I added in there called the Munster Buttermilk, and one of the other sets of tunes that I selected. The third tune, I guess, that I wanted to talk about for today is one that actually Nikki requested that I add. It's by a group called The Gloaming. So The Gloaming is made up of, it's kind of an Irish supergroup, and it's got a bunch of members. Jarlo Leonard, Martin Hayes, Dennis Cahill, Caoimhin O'Reilly, and Thomas Bartlett. And, all of these guys are just, amazing in and of their own right. And so, one, I wanted to show kind of the interconnectedness of the genre. The Gloaming is also interesting, and this tune is interesting in that it's not a traditional tune, although it has a whole bunch of traditional elements to it. And it's also got a really quite beautiful Irish poem, which I encourage you to go and look up the words to, but it talks about, a man and his relationship with his money, with his mother, and his mother as his mother is dying. And it talks about kind of the weight of that relationship, the weight of the years, the weight of his mother's body, the weight of all of their conversations, and it goes through in Irish and basically lists out all of these weights and really just gives a really kind of tender and poignant portrait of that relationship between mother and son. And so to me, this is another example of phenomenal playing, but kind of what traditional Irish music can do and be as it's growing in today. But it brings us to, carries Martin Hayes. So we started with P.J. Hayes, Martin's father, and Martin Hayes is now coming in, and he's in this group, The Gloaming. And so the song is called The Weight of Things, and it's a great one to listen to. The third area, the fourth kind of piece, I guess, that I wanted to talk about is I'm going to now carry on through The Gloaming and go to another favorite fiddler, and that's Caoimhin O'Reilly. I first got introduced to him through a recording that just gets handed around from person to person. That is a recording of Southern California Pipers Chinole from, I think it was maybe 2 or something like that, or maybe 3, I could look it up. But this duo, they called themselves Kitty Lie Over, which comes from the tune by that name, Kitty Lie Over, is made up of Mick O'Brien, the uilleann piper, and Caoimhin O'Reilly, the fiddler who is in the gloaming. And it's an amazing recording. I can't give you access to that one because it's one of these that's just handed from person to person. But Kitty Lie Over went and recorded an album, and Caoimhin O'Reilly has recorded a bunch of other albums, and he's in groups like the Gloaming, and has done some tremendous stuff. But I thought that I would include a tune that Mick O'Brien and Caoimhin O'Reilly play on that album, actually a set of jigs again. So the first two tunes in this, there are three jigs in this set. One of them is a slip jig, and it's called Nakana Bambana. And I'm sure I'm going to butcher the pronunciations, but it's the Fair Little Canavans. And it's a slip jig is a tune. Well, so a jig is a dance tune. Most of the tunes that I'm play and that I've got for you today are dance tunes. And the standard double jigs, single jigs are tunes that are in a 6/8 time, which have a double feel. So the tunes that I played before, 2, 1, 2, those are double jigs. A slip jig is in triple time. It's a 9/8 time signature. And as you listen to this tune, if you go and listen to it, it has a 1-2 feel to it. But the third tune in this set by Kitty Lie Over is the Munster Buttermilk, which is the one that I added to that Carrow and Portro set that I talked about earlier. So please go listen to those. And now let's see, the next set of tunes that I wanted to add in here is from the first Irish group that I ever really fell in love with. I've been listening to Irish music, for a long time, but, 25, 30 years or so. And the first group that I really fell in love with is this group called Alton. And they are from Donegal. And the Irish music that's played up in Donegal, actually, so there's different styles of Irish music that you'll find all throughout the islands, down towards the south. In Kerry, you'll find a lot of polkas played. You'll find a lot of ornamentation played, where there's a lot of rolls and things like that that you play in the music. And up in the north in Donegal, it actually sounds more like music that you would typically hear in Scotland. There's a particular type of tune called a strathspey that gets added into music in Donegal, which really isn't played much in the rest of Ireland. So Alton is a group from Donegal and plays in the Donegal style. One of the things that they do is they do these bowed triplets. And so instead of playing a lot of rolls where they'll do ornamentations with the fingering, they'll play a lot of triplet ornamentation with the bow. It's a really cool sound, and it's a fairly unique sound in a lot of the Irish music that you might hear. I think most of what you hear is more kind of from the south of Ireland. But Alton's a tremendous group, and this is a great set of reels off of their album Harvest Storm. On that album is another tune called The King of the Pipers, and that was the first Irish tune that I ever learned. It's what kind of started me on my whole journey into Irish music. But this set of reels that I've got for you is the first tune that kicks off the album. And so really this is kind of like the first really truly great Irish music that I'd ever heard. So I wanted to share it with you. The next set of music, Alton is a band, and so that's actually a fairly new phenomenon, right? So back in long ago, and even into like the 40s and 50s and things like that, you really wouldn't have Irish bands. I mean, people play the music. Usually the way that the music gets played is in what's called a session. And so you'll have people who gather in a pub. I go to one every week where, a bunch of people, whoever shows up, and you sit around, you have some drinks, and people bring instruments, lots of different instruments. So at our session, there's a regular piper who shows up. There are a bunch of fiddlers. The last one that I went to, there were 3 flute players. There will be whistles, button accordions, concertinas. You'll get full-on accordions from time to time, mandolins, bouzoukis, guitars. And so people will just show up and play. And the way that it works is someone will start a tune, and if you know the tune, you join in. And then usually they will do a set of tunes. And so they'll start playing a first tune and then they'll pick a new tune and they'll just flow right into that tune. And that's part of the fun of it is, kind of seeing what's going to come next or putting tunes together that sound fun together, that give a lift. If you're playing for dancing, it's really great to be able to, have a tune go on, the dancers are going, and then you do a tune, you change the key, and everyone it just adds to the energy to it. But so that's the way that Irish music got played, is that, in these impromptu sessions or you're doing a dance. And so this concept of a band really only popped up in the 70s. And so this next selection that I have is from the band Planxty. And Planxty there were a couple of bands right around that time with many of the same members. So the Bothy Band was one of them, Patrick Street was one of them, that really kind of tapped into the folk revival that was happening elsewhere in music, is happening in rock music in England and with bands like Fairport Convention. And in Ireland, it took the form of people playing Irish music in a band setting where they could do more with orchestration. They could do more with a particular setting of a tune, kind of deciding who to add in, create some motion in the tune rather than just kind of repeating it over and over. And so Planxty was one of these founding groups. And actually, if you're a fan, like I am, of Kate Bush's music, you might remember from the album, I think is one of the greatest albums of all time, The Hounds of Love. There's a bunch of Irish music on Hounds of Love, and two of the members from Planxty, Donal Lunny and Liam O'Flynn. So Donal Lunny plays the bowron and plays the bouzouki, which is kind of a deep mandolin that's kind of halfway between a mandolin and a guitar. So he plays that on the Kate Bush album, on the Jig of Life, if you'll remember that from the second side of that album. And Liam O'Flynn is the uilleann piper, who plays a bunch with Kate Bush. And so they both came out of Planxty. And this album was one of their early albums. And as a matter of fact, I heard a guest DJ segment with Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols talking to Bob Boylan on NPR's All Songs Considered. And he brought a tune from Planxty's album, Well Below the Valley. And so this music has kind of deep roots and deep influences and deep connections. And it was another one of these kind of first Irish albums for me. So I talked about Alton, and now I'm going to go way back into kind of the roots of Irish music. So Irish music and Irish culture actually kind of was suppressed for a bunch of years. This is what led to the Irish Revolution in the 20s. But, the British came and, colonized Ireland and really, suppressed a lot of the culture. The Catholic Church led to the suppression of a lot of the traditional Irish culture, which was seen as more pagan. And actually, there's a fantastic book by an author named John B. Keane called The Bowron Makers. And it's a novel, it's not a history, but it gives you a really great taste of the time in the 50s when traditional music was still really frowned upon, was really kind of pushed down by the church. And anyway, so it's a great book that gives you a sense of kind of where this all came from. And then, with the Irish diaspora in the, with the potato famines and into the early 1900s, America ended up playing a big part in the preservation and continuance of Irish music and recording. And the new technology of recording actually played a huge part in the preservation of this music. And in the early 1900s, there was a fiddler named Michael Coleman who brought his music to New York. And that's where there were recording studios, and some of the very first recording studios where they were recording on wax cylinders, and still some of the early 78s. And we've been able to get a collection of some of Michael Coleman's recordings. And those recordings are actually a lot of the source material for pretty much all of the Irish musicians who have come since then. That was the first time that this music had been recorded and people could hear it other than just being in a pub. And it started to get, broader reach, and people started to hear it and learn it. And those albums, those collections, there's a 2-disc set of Michael Coleman recordings. They're kind of the canon. And I spent a couple of years trying to go and learn all of the tunes on there. I got many of them. I didn't get all of them. Many of them have just gone in and gone right back out again, and so I get to have the joy of relearning them. But I thought that it would be good to include some tunes from Michael Coleman, just to give you a sense of where the music came from and how people are going back and rediscovering the roots and how that has come forward. And so I included a recording of a pair of hornpipes. And so hornpipes is another dance form. It actually is kind of like the naval nautical dance form, right? You hear about a lot of, sailors out on boats dancing the hornpipe, and it's kind of a bouncy, hopping kind of dance. And so these are two hornpipes. One's called the Liverpool and one's called O'Neill's. And they're by the great fiddler, Michael Coleman. Okay, and now is when I want to go back and say all of those other things that I said about Planxty. Because, so out of, that first recorded music, Irish music, then you have, people starting to play it more, and then you get more recording, and recording really starts to play another role in the dissemination of Irish music, and that's in this formation of bands. And so that's where we get the band Planxty. And so the first tune that I wanted to play or have on here from the band Planxty is the first song on their album, The Well Below the Valley, and it's called Cúnla. I haven't gone back to do the actual research, so this may be an existing song. So oftentimes what will happen is you'll have songs that are played as dance tunes, and sometimes we'll have words to them. And so sometimes they get done as songs as well, and that's both traditional and it's kind of the way that it goes. So earlier I mentioned the band or the duo that call themselves Kitty Lie Over, and that tune Kitty Lie Over actually has words to it. And a couple months ago we had a really great singer show up at our session, and singing is kind of a rare thing at sessions, but sometimes you'll get a good singer, and this guy was phenomenal. He's living over in Denmark right now. He just happened to be in the States, came by the session, and we played the tune Kitty Lie Over, and he knew the words. And so, we would play some of the tune and he would then sing a verse, and it was amazing. And so this group Planxty did that with the tune that they call Cúnla. But it turns out that tune, you can go back to one of those Michael Coleman albums and find the 5-part jig, the Fry's Breeches, on that album. And so that they took the melody from the Fry's Breeches and they put this tune Cúnla to it, and they actually weave an instrumental version of the Fry's Breeches together with the singing, and it's tremendous. So go listen to Cúnla. The next Planxty tune that I wanted to add in here is another pair of slip jigs. So remember those 3/8 jigs, and these really feature the piping of Liam O'Flynn, and they were some of the first tunes that I learned to play. I talked before about The King of the Pipers being one of the very first tunes. I think this might have been 2 and 3, and maybe 4 and 5. And so they're the two slip jigs, the Kid on the Mountain, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of the next one. It's An Fís Fluch, I think, which is a Gaelic term that I looked it up, and it literally translates to wet pea, as in like the legume, the pea pod, which has a very, very dirty connotation. And so go look it up and have fun with that. But it turns out that it's one of the best tunes to play. I still love this tune to this day. It's got a ton of fire to it, and it's a lot of fun to play. And so I wanted to share that in this set. And then the last tune that I wanted to include here is going to be my third tune from Planxty, and this one I included it because no discussion of Irish music would be complete without a mention of the harpist, Turlough O'Carolan. So Carolan lived from Indy. He was blind, and he was itinerant. He would take his harp and he would wander around the country, and he composed tunes. He would stay with people, friends, supporters who would welcome into their home. He would play for them, and he would compose tunes for them. And this guy was a contemporary of Bach's. There is one tune that he wrote that I love to play, that is affectionately termed Carolan's Concerto. And one biography of him that I read said that he was enamored of the music of Corelli, and Corelli has a a mandolin concerto, and I believe it was that concerto that Carolyn listened to and really loved, and so he wrote an Irish tune that kind of evoked some of that same feel, and that was called Carolyn's Concerto. So this is what was going on. So you had kind of the music of Bach going on the continent, and out in the Irish Islands, they knew about that music. Much of the dancing that is done still to this day comes from the same sort of court dancing and country dancing that was going on in the continent in Europe. If you look in things like Handel's water music, you will find jigs, you will find hornpipes. If you look in, Bach's cello suites, you will find dances, and those same dances got carried through over into Ireland, but got created into different music. Types of music that he coined the term, I think it's figured that he coined the term planxty, which I think he meant to be a hymn of praise or thanks for his hosts, for his patrons. And so you have all these tunes that will have people's names associated with them, Irwin or Fanny Power, or in this case, Hewlett. And so this tune from the group Planxty is a Planxty by the great blind Irish harper who's kind of the patron saint of Irish music, Turlough O'Carolan, and this is the Planxty Hewlett. So there you go, a set of Irish music and a little bit of a discussion about, I don't know, why I'm fascinated with it and some of the detail that's in the history of it, and I hope that makes your St. Patrick's Day a little bit more enjoyable. Take care.